Hey, welcome back to Getting Rich Together. I'm your host, Shama Bunton. And ladies, today I'm inviting you to something big. I'm inviting you to a movement. We just wrapped a sold out, unforgettable gathering in San Francisco. 140 women, 11 bold conversations on stage, and over 800 connections sparked. We were featured in Fox News, NBC, and with this movement, we all felt it. We are building something real. And now it's New York City's turn. On May 13th, we're coming together at the MasterCard HQ in the heart of Manhattan for the next Wealth Catalyst Summit. This is where women come to preserve, build, and invest wealth, not alone, but in community, in it together. And here's what sets us apart. You won't just sit and listen. You'll be curated and matched intentionally with other women who share your ambition. Our peer matchmaking connects you based on what you're building, learning, and investing in. Walk in with questions and walk out with collaborators. You'll hear from women who are doing the work, buying businesses, raising capital, investing in real estate, collecting art, backing Broadway, and so much more. Come to be inspired, come to be matched, and come to get ready to move your capital. Tickets are on sale now at wealthcatalystsummit.com. Claim your seat in the room where women rise together. And now, let's get on to today's episode.
Welcome to Getting Rich Together, the show for successful women who are looking to take their financial futures to the next level. I'm your host, Shama Bunton. When I started my wealth building journey, nobody knocked on my door to give me all the answers. So I want to talk to the experts who've done it and bring the answers to you so we can discover the right opportunities that will help us achieve the financial futures we've always dreamed of, together, and have fun doing it. So let's dive into this episode and start getting rich together.
I am here today with the fearless and powerful Sherry Finkel Murphy. Sherry, everyone today knows you as the CEO and founder of Madina Molly, where you take the time to be able to help people figure out their financial education and planning, which is something that is on everyone's top of mind, but not something that everyone takes the time to do. And it is so important and powerful, not just the work that you're up to with your company, but also with your endowment, which I think is exciting. And I'm so excited to jump into more of these details. But outside of having a prolific career and being in the space of wealth advisory and wealth management, before you were a big powerhouse, you were once a little girl. So Sherry, thank you for being on the show today. And thank you for jumping in to the very beginning of where it all started.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. And I'm not certain that that little girl is so far away. Don't we carry that little girl with us all the time? When when I was a little girl, I'm not sure what I dreamed, but I'm fairly certain that I have achieved it and then some. Why don't you tell me what you want to know about Sherry, the little girl?
Well, what I think is so interesting is that, we spend so much time thinking about like our, who we are today, but it all came from some home somewhere with parents. And especially when it comes to money stories, the things that were happening around you. So Sherry, take me back to a young age of 7, 9, 12 years old. Where were you living in this big, beautiful world? What were your parents up to? And what did you notice and see about money as a young girl?
The money narrative, lots of people write about the money narrative and how it's set very, very young. And I would say there's not just a money narrative, but there's a work narrative. And I was just discussing this the other day. I am a latchkey kid. And in suburban New York, if you read the papers, it's ancient history to you, but it's my youth. The New York City area, the New York City suburbs really were suffering in the late 60s and the early 70s. Schools on austerity, not a great place to grow up. Where I grew up was Valley Stream, New York, the very first suburb outside of Queens. And so we were the first generation who had left the city. In my case, I'm third generation Brooklyn. And we left the city and hightailed it out to suburbia, as post-war families did. And there were no real hardships, but there was work. So I came from a middle class family. My dad owned a hardware store on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. He was up before dawn and driving into the city, and he was back after dark, and he worked 6 days a week, taking off Tuesday. If you know anything about the Lower East Side, back before the blue laws were repealed in the 70s, and this is telling, back before the blue laws were repealed in the 70s, which was the law that said you have to be closed on Sunday to worship, there were exceptions made for the very Jewish Lower East Side, and that's the Finkel side of my family, because we celebrated the Sabbath on Saturday and closed on Saturday. So the Lower East Side was open Sunday, and Sunday was the busiest day of the week by far. Long story, long story shorter, when the blue laws were repealed in the mid 70s, my father's hardware store business bottomed. So let me take you a little further back, because my mom who is turning 97 next week. So I spend a lot of time talking about multi-generational stuff. Nobody's going anywhere. Mom stayed home for about 3 seconds after having kids. She's an NYU business grad before her time. And while she married and said, I'm going to have a couple of kids, she did not last at home for more than a hot minute and promptly went back to work. And as I started, we were, myself and my brother, we were latchkey kids. And so she always worked. And I think the money narrative for my family is that money will facilitate a lifestyle. We never wanted, we always had things, but I was very aware of how much effort it took to get those things. Having two working parents and a father who was not generally available for weekends at all. As a matter of fact, we were very selective about when we asked him to participate in children, because he had to take off for my brother's college graduation. I was in the store minding it. By then, of course, we were teenagers. And for my college graduation, my brother was in the store.
Oh.
But otherwise, he worked all the time.
That's so interesting, like to see how work ethic gets instilled. I have a feeling you're going to start telling me about your commitment to working hard.
Yeah, I could not work fast enough. I could not work early enough. The minute I turned 16, I had a job at a bagel bakery, and I was walking to the bagel bakery at 4:30 in the morning and preparing to kettle. And I know how to make bagels. So there.
I mean, there are very few people that I know who can actually say that. I mean, everyone wonders what is. So tell me, Sherry, what is the secret to making a good bagel?
Good kettling. So you cannot treat it like any other baked good. You have to kettle it hot and for the right amount of time to get the hard, shiny coat. And then you cook it.
I mean, I feel like this is the big gold nugget that's going to
you know how to bake a bagel.
I mean, that's amazing. So what did you do? So that first job, I always feel like making money gives us, at a young age, it is the ticket. It means so much to us. And we have no idea what the future looks like with how we make it. But those first few dollars that we start to make are so meaningful. How did you relate to your first job? Was it savings account? Was it, doing experiences and things you wanted? What did money mean to you when you started working?
It meant freedom. It meant saving for things that I could purchase. Again, no hardship in the household. If there was something I wanted, my parents would help me by paying for half, things like that. Again, this is as a teenager, not as a kid. They would certainly help me by paying for half. They helped me get my first car. They helped me get my first real estate. I was very determined. I'm not even certain I can tell you why. I was very determined to own real estate and purchased my first condo when I was 24. And before anybody says, "Oh, that's impressive," the mortgage was 11.85%. It was something. It was something in the early 80s. And what I did want to share with you, because I don't want to give my mother short shrift, she has always worked and didn't really stop working until she was in her early 80s. Sometimes she did different things, but stopping never seemed to be an option for her. And I'm absolutely using that as the role modeling for me. But I said, I want to move into New York City. And I had a condo in Great Neck, New York, which was on the Long Island Railroad, Port Washington line. So I could walk to the train, go into the city, do my thing. And those who know commuting know that the Port Washington line is a straight line. You don't have to change at Jamaica, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, I want to trade up. I want to live in New York City. And she said, "Sherry, if you wait for a man to bring you the good things in life, you're going to be waiting a long time." And
Sage words.
yes, I sold the first property and I got a co-op in New York City. It was, we can call it a garret apartment. It was a co-op, but it was the top floor, a studio, maybe 500 square feet. And it was kind of awesome. It was
I
kind
love that. That's so amazing. So some of the things in high school, when you were saying like, and I saved my money for the things I wanted, were the things you wanted, like, what were those things? What were some of the things that motivated you?
What a wonderful question. Thank you. The things that motivated me were not volume things. I believe I had a sense of the classic. I wanted to have good shoes and a string of pearls to go to work with. Why? I have no idea. But these were images. Images. I don't know if they were Coco Chanel images or Audrey Hepburn images, but the image was, you will work to acquire classic things. You will purchase one suit per quarter once you are fully employed until you have a full wardrobe. And a little bit different time. The IRA was a new thing. Most people still had pensions. The workforce was not ready for a pig-headed woman. And oh my gosh, the mouth on me. I'm a truth speaker. And as we know, that just gets everybody in trouble.
It certainly does. It also sounds like you were, I feel like they say, and I've noticed this now as being a stepmom, that kids are born a certain way. And sometimes there's a lot of conditioning, certainly, but then there's also these hardwired ways in which we are just different and we've come to the planet. And so your wiring was like classic items and pearls and somehow the prudency to think of a suit a quarter, which I don't know anyone else who has thought about it so deliberately.
And I can't even tell you why. I mean, I'm going to assume it was the media of the time. So think of what I grew up on. Reruns of Superman with Lois Lane. Noel Neill is behind me. Do you see Noel Neill behind me? I realize that in the podcast you won't be able to see it, but I have an autographed picture of Noel Neill as Lois Lane that was given to me for my 40th birthday because she was the role model, not June Cleaver, the mother. It was this working woman who was feisty and in a peplum suit and, just happened to have the world's strongest man wrapped around her pinky. But I think that was even beside the point. It was the peplum suit and the job. And that was the role modeling that spoke to me and not the father knows best role modeling, which was truthfully, it was before my time. Leave It to Beaver, June Cleaver was my time. I also grew up on a steady diet of Depression era movie musicals like Fred and Ginger. So everybody was overdressed. And that would have affected my 80s wardrobe. And if you recall the 80s, we were known for fabulousness. Yes. I mean, my shoulder pads had epaulets and gems, and we were certainly dressed.
That's amazing. So let's fast forward a little bit to university years and sort of talk about
how your experience was in university and what you decided to study. Were you a dedicated full-time student? Had you already had clarity on what jobs and career would look like post graduation? Talk to me a little bit about navigating being a student and starting to find your way in the world.
I was very aware when I was in college, possibly because my mother said, "Get as much scholarship money as you can. We're paying retail for your brother." That is a quote. That is a quote. I was very aware that I should not look a gift horse in the mouth, in that it was very important to my parents that I go to college. And I did. My undergrad was the University of Rochester. And this might be embarrassing. I chose it because, yes, they did give me the most money, but also it was a beautiful campus and it was just very romantic. I was going to law school right up until the moment that I didn't want to take the LSAT. So I was going to law school from the get go, had always been told that I should be a lawyer. Again, didn't know why, no research into what attorneys did. You thought that an attorney was, I don't know, in a Perry Mason courtroom. You didn't, or LA Law in the 80s. And those were pretty nasty lawyers. My understanding is that after LA Law aired, whatever night of the week that was, attorneys were uniformly badly behaved. Like, people would notice this in courtrooms, that their behavior was adjusted. So here's your walk down memory lane. Anyhow, in college, I was very aware that my parents were paying for it. And back to that repeal of the blue laws, what I didn't find out until years later is that my mother, in addition to her Monday through Friday job, and my father, of course, working 6 days a week, just with much less income, she would take excess inventory from the hardware store and go to the flea market that is now the Roosevelt Field shopping mall. And she would take my grandmother, who also lived to 96, she would take my grandmother, sit my grandmother on a beach chair and she would sell excess inventory. And I had no idea that my mother was moonlighting in this way to make sure that both kids could go to college. I
That's
really must have been
incredible.
in my 30s before I learned this.
Wow, go mom.
Go
Like
mom, go mom.
she's a real rock
And
star.
she never complained. She wanted what she wanted and was willing to do the work to get it, whether it was for her kids or for herself.
Mm.
So that is the theme here, that you want something, hustle, girl.
Yeah. So
Get on.
when you were graduating then and starting to think about the next steps, was it immediately I'm going to go and do some postgraduate studies? Was it I am going to launch my career right now and I know what I want to do? How did you decide what the next steps were and what were some of the outcomes that you were hoping to get as you launched?
I think that decision. So let me back up a second. I was going to law school right up until the moment I was not going to law school. And a friend who was a computer science major, I'm going to call him a computer science major, but the Earth's crust was cooling at that point. There was no such thing as a computer science major. It was a combination of math and engineering. So a computer science major made a bet with me. We needed electives. And he said, "I bet I will get a better grade in my liberal arts elective than you will in your science elective." And I said, "You're on." And I took Computer Science 101 and got an A.
Oh, you crushed it.
And fast forward. So I have an interesting insight to the origins of modern computing because I was there. My second or third computer course that I was taking just to fulfill my elective requirement was non-numeric computing using the Lisp language. Hopefully, I haven't put listeners to sleep. This was machine translation. This was the first artificial intelligence language. You were trying to translate foreign tongues. You were trying to parse sentences. In other words, it was non-numeric. It was not numbers. And a good example that we always used for machine translation is the soul is willing, but the spirit is weak. That expression, and maybe translating it into another language and then having it come back as oh, wine is fine, but the steak is not so good. That kind. So we know, because we now use these tools regularly on our phones, we know that language doesn't always translate easily. Oh, how far they've come. Apologies for the tangent, but the math and engineering majors in the class would get the homework, and it would be something along the lines of separate this paragraph into subject and predicate, identify the parts of speech, then reassemble it as something else, blah, blah, blah. And they would say to me, just as I had said to them in the data structures classes, Sherry, what's a subject and a predicate? Can you help me with the homework? And I laughed and I thought, I have found my calling. I am the man-machine interface here.
Oh my gosh, I love this.
And then so that was how I went to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute for a master's in communication and user interface design. Who knew? Went to work for the company that had the very first graphical user interface, writing Lisp utilities. Maybe you don't know. I mean, today help is all over the screen, but if you clicked help, you would get a menu. And
Yes.
I used to write that information for how to use programs and how to, again, that man.
Okay, so hold up. So you are trailblazing in a field that most people don't even know what's happening in the world. So very niche, very at the bleeding edge. I imagine there were not many women who were in this group as well. So also at the forefront of proving yourself and taking these bets and not letting someone prove you wrong. And then now you're out there getting jobs in categories and areas that I'm sure most people were like, oh, this is going to be a blip, or what's the future here? We're not sure. How did you position and land this job? And did you negotiate at all? Was it just exciting to get in the room and start to play and build? How did you think about this first big career move? And then also obviously having to pioneer and really self-advocate, because I can't imagine there were sponsors who were women ahead of you who were able to advocate.
That job was a skills fit. That back in the day when people really looked at resumes and you had a chance of your cover letter being read, there was a skills fit there. There weren't many people who were going to say, yes, I've got the language part down and I've got the technical part down. And the Rensselaer program, the RPI program, was really innovative at the time in this new, on the cusp of computing. We did work. We thought my master's thesis was about computer-aided education. Long before there were video games, we thought that kids were going to be dropped off at computing centers where they would connect their dumb terminal to a back-end mainframe. So we had not seen yet the advent of the PC. And I was, in fact, a speaker at the very first PC Expo in 1984. And of course, PC Expo has gone the way of the dinosaurs too. Let me go back to what was interesting. That first job was with a startup. And I want to talk about bubbles and, these hot areas and risk. The first company was a startup in MIT's backyard. And I had the pleasure of working for a woman who was one of the first MBAs in Harvard Business School's first graduating class that included women. There were 12 of them. Her name was Eileen Lang. She went on to do some really innovative things in tech, and she became the CEO of Catalyst. And Catalyst is a nonprofit that tracks women in business and how companies evaluate and use women and minorities. And she's just a very impressive figure. I do not know if she is retired now. I suspect she might be. But what was incredibly cool, innovative, and slightly weird was that she was working while pregnant with her, I think her third child. And we had a playpen in the office. And she was fearless about modestly nursing under a blanket during meetings she led. Like this woman was cool. This was 1982 and she rocked. And if she ever hears your podcast, I hope she knows it. I mean, just extraordinary. And I was green and difficult and competent, but green and difficult and certainly very impressed. Fast forward to what might be more interesting is that I moved back to New York. And because the company folded, and my next two companies also folded. So I want people to know that this has happened before. Technology goes through boom and bust cycles. And I was part of the early 80s startup, run out of money, close the doors. Startup, maybe don't run out of money, some other reason to close the door. So I went through those cycles. And then, of course, I went through the cycle in 2000 again.
So Sherry, for those for those startups that you were with, were they, now every day people talk about negotiating your comp package or your stock options or looking at how early am I in this company and what does it look like? And were you so driven by the excitement of being on the forefront, or were you thinking about sort of negotiations around compensation packages that early on in your career?
Well, for the first couple of companies, I think I was thinking about creating a lifestyle, back to the buying the suit every quarter. And by the way, one of the reasons for thinking intentionally about the suit is that we still wore them every day to work.
Yeah.
You needed a workable wardrobe. I think that I was worried about the same thing young people are, and that's buying the things that you need first, that you don't have to buy. You buy them every 20 years, whether it's furniture for the apartment or just your first car, things like that. So in that respect, there were firsts. Certainly I'm going to say the third or the fourth company by 1988, I had an 11-year employment, and that included incentive stock options. And so I was the first person I knew who had incentive stock options. And not only were they exciting, but whenever the stock dropped, we would buy it. We were great believers in what we were doing. And so many of us purchased our own stock, completely ignoring any recommendation to limit it to under 8% of your net worth. So it could have all gone bust. It was also the first of the 401k plans. The tech companies were offering 401ks. Before that, it was pensions. And sometimes we were jealous of people who still had pensions, but that also came with much more structured work. You could work for the phone company and get a pension back in the day. I'm not certain I was cut out for the phone company. What I did want to tell you, and this is perhaps a little bit of feminist breastfeeding, is that when I was back in New York, the tech was a little lower and people were a little more just buttoned up. That's the difference between Manhattan and MIT's backyard. You had the bearded hippie geniuses and you had the business people in suits. And one of the things that I was doing was I was working as a sales engineer, and a sales engineer was responsible for demonstrations, configurations, sizing. We were jacks of all trade then. Not unusual for me to be schlepping a PC, a demonstration PC, again, predates laptops, picture it, a demonstration PC and monitor down the block on a trolley cart to get to a client, and loading it into a cab and getting to a client or a prospect to demonstrate something, or they would come to us. I was well compensated and had a great deal of freedom. You're good at what you do, you get freedom, right? And I made a lot of money for a lot of people. And those people were all tall, handsome, blue suited, yellow tied guys. And it
Mm.
started to bug me. I was
I
like,
can I can understand that.
I'm doing all the work and you are driving a really nice car. And I asked to go into sales and was rebuffed. And I asked again and was rebuffed. And I asked 3 or 4 more times. And eventually I was given what today would be a lawsuit worthy package. They basically created a junior type sales role with a terrible compensation package, never expecting me to accept it. And accept it, I did. And I was the rookie of the year. And I had a very lucrative and good sales career for the next almost 20. And I have the glass ceiling lumps on my head. They are permanent. They are permanent. I can't tell you how. So I guess let me back up a second. I cried. I'm in the office late. I'm crying. I'm on the telephone with my mother. She is in Florida. And she says, Sherry, the chief information officer, it absolutely has respect and gravitas and a title in a corner office, but nobody makes what the chief sales officer makes. No,
That's
nobody
right.
makes what the chief revenue officer. I don't think we had the title CRO then. And she said, go for it. So
Oh, I
there
love
was
that.
Hurricane Jackie's voice in my head again.
In this time when you're seeing more money than you probably could have imagined and really starting to understand what it's like to have money and exercise your wealth and think about things more seriously on the personal side, the career side, here you are breaking glass ceilings, really throwing yourself to the forefront of your own career ambitions. I imagine obviously working a lot and being able to really dedicate yourself to this and seeing more money than potentially maybe your father saw, right? Or maybe your mother saw. And
Yeah.
and then also being able to do things for yourself materially that maybe you hadn't considered. So what was it like to start to increase in your earnership than your family? And what were their feedback and experiences like as they saw you really skyrocket?
I think they got to participate. They were certainly proud of me. There was no pushback from my family. I think that my mother has occasionally said that I'm having the career that she promised herself and didn't get to have. And I'm like, yeah, you did fine, Mom. It's okay. It's okay. Stop making yourself wrong. My expression, stop making yourself wrong. We have mothers for that. Not only do I use it thinking of her, but I think she should stop making herself wrong too. She did everything she wanted to do and did it well. I think that they were the beneficiaries of it. I was certainly in a position to take care of the family. Again, nobody was suffering, but I also wasn't asking for money. That's a good thing too. In my early marriage, so this would be the first marriage, I married at just about 34. And he was an artist. He is an artist. So money was not the reason for this marriage. And I created the income in the household. And one of the things that I remember very specifically when wanting to purchase a house was that I would buy each of us $100 gift. $100 was a lot of money from each commission statement and sock away the rest. So I have always been a save for what you want. I'm not saying save forever. I'm not saying you can't have a nice lifestyle, but like any diet, if you if you expect perfection, you're going to fall off the wagon. So this $100 gift, which I put great thought into, it was occasionally silly, it was intended to be frivolous. I used that in order to save everything else and invest it.
That's incredible. And you starting to invest your money and starting to get exposure to what that looks like and how to think about it. How did you start to piece together this initial understanding of wealth building beyond the savings account? Did someone chat with you about starting to invest money? Was natural curiosity? Where did you start to get your information? And how did you start to flex that through investing?
I think that the exposure to the incentive stock options as part of the compensation was that would have been the linchpin. So that would have been, you pull that out and suddenly everything falls into place. Or maybe do things fall apart when you remove the linchpin? I don't know. They either fell apart or fell into place. But I started exploring the markets from there. And my brother, and of course, some of it is luck, is who you know. My brother, let's just say he had an insurance guy, and he's always been an insurance guy. And I don't know if or think about the world of insurance as a financial solution, but it is possible to build conservative wealth using insurance products too. And so this exposure to the stock market via ISOs and this exposure to insurance, that would have been in my 30s. That would have been in my early 30s, but I didn't have a financial advisor, someone who was advising me until later. That was all. This was in the age, I don't know how old the Charles Schwab self-directed accounts are, but that would be the 30 years or so that they've been in existence were the self-directed accounts.
That's amazing. And as far as like conversations with friends about money or colleagues or even your husband at that time, did you have active conversations with other people about this, or was this sort of just happening in the Sherry Finkel Murphy world?
What's happening in the Sherry Finkel Murphy world? And the reason for that is that I simply had more money than the people around me, and I didn't want to make anyone uncomfortable. And I think that one of the things that still hurts occasionally in a pre-internet environment is that it was very hard for me to find educational and financial women peers, especially since I was in technology sales, not in banking. I think there were few in banking, but I was not in banking. When I found them among my clients, we recognized one another.
I love that. Can you share with me around the time of deciding to get divorced and then rethinking about finances, were there any sort of inflection points as your life changed? I feel like if we're doing life right, we are always changing and life is changing and evolving. But as you found yourself single again and re-looking at the world, had anything changed for you about how you thought about money? Were you doubly down on committed in certain areas? Were there things that you learned about yourself and money during that process?
I think that work money narrative that I grew up with came into play a few times. And I apologize that the trajectory of the story is long, but that's because the career's been long. I've already got 40 plus years under the belt. During the dot-com bubble bursting, I lost a lot of money. When I say lost a lot of money, the account balance went down. I didn't do anything and it came back, but that decade from 2000 to 2010 was not great for the market in general. So the account balance went down. Oh, well. I remember being at a bar with a girlfriend, and she said, maybe she was drunk. I don't know. She's like, Sherry lost blah, 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 $1,000. And I'm like, can I crawl under the bar now? Why on earth are you revealing this information? But it was sort of the thing. Everybody lost money. So if you had, like, yeah, okay. I think that I developed two things. One is from living in a high-tech environment, I knew the value of an emergency fund. I knew that if I was going to carry a mortgage, I needed cash on the side because I or the company could lose income. And there were plenty of times in sales when I thought something was going to happen that didn't happen through things that I could not control. And so that emergency fund was fairly early in my career, and it was to mitigate the fear of being suddenly unemployed because my employer was just not there. I think one of the pieces of advice that I've been able to give clients over the years is that employers are manifestly untrustworthy, and that has proven to be the case. And so you should have, in addition to an emergency fund, you should have a forget you fund. And I'm a big fan. I have used my forget you fund 3 times. I used it to take a sabbatical, a year and a half sabbatical that I'm going to call it a mental health sabbatical. I was probably in my highest earning years, and the company was going to merge with another company. Again, crazy tech cycles. I said, I cannot be here for this. I gave them 6 months notice and said, I'm out of here for a while.
Good
Bye.
for you. I mean, what an incredible gift to have given yourself.
It was important. It was important because it was also tied to a difficult perimenopausal experience, which is the kind of thing you can say now on a podcast, and people didn't. But then I couldn't. All I could do was run into a conference room and cry and go, what on earth is wrong with me? And then, put on my big girl panties and march out of the room again. And nobody to talk to, nobody to compare notes with. And I remember, this is going to be another one of those stories that somebody out there will be able to appreciate. I remember the secretary used to bring in the daily news with her in the morning, and I would occasionally grab a cup of coffee and grab the paper and flip through it. And Chris Evert had just announced her retirement from tennis, and I burst into tears. And I thought, oh my gosh, I have to get out of here.
So you did.
I funded a year and a half off. I am a big fan of mid-career sabbaticals. Again, my grandmother went to 96. My mom is hale and hearty at 97. We are going to have 100-year lives. This business of saying I am going to work and then I am going to retire, whatever the heck that means, is not going to work for most of us because we cannot twiddle our thumbs for 40 years.
We cannot. It's unsustainable.
The trick is to figure out how to make your income on your terms. And, I won't bore you by going off onto a financial planning tangent, but I like to say that I'm not just the leader of the club, I'm a member of the club. I have to address this for myself. And my answer has been to get a hobby, which is financial and longevity planning. So I used my Forget You fund for the sabbatical. I used it to change careers, and I have used it to leave my practice. I sold my practice at the end of 2023, my financial planning practice, and launched Madina Molly.
It's incredible. So I want to hear about this transition into moving into the space of being a private wealth advisor. That is to go from technology and having your own personal experiences in obviously wealth building. And it sounds like really developing tools and techniques that are now serving all of the women you're serving and also your clients when you had your practice. But when did you decide that this conversation around money and moving into private wealth advising, which is really so intimate and personal, right? It's like at the end of the day, there isn't like a set the plan and forget the plan. Life is messy. It changes. It's not linear. Like so many things happen. What were the dominoes that fell that sort of helped you decide that working in financial services and moving into this industry was really the next move for you?
So all of those things happened. All of that, life got messy. In my mid to late 40s, the software company where I was an executive was acquired by a behemoth. Now, the good news about this behemoth, I'll probably get in trouble, so I won't say their name. But the good news about the behemoth is that my father finally recognized the company that employed me. So as he was in his late 80s, he could say, my daughter's an executive with X. And that meant something to him. And so there was some joy in that. What was not joyous was that they said, here's your retention bonus. Stay as long as you like. We don't do executives we acquire. We only build them here. And I was furious. And pretty much that. And this company is known for its ageism. There are plenty of companies that acquire talent and then proceed to jettison them. Like, what'd you do? Acquire it for the maintenance stream only? Are you nuts? And maybe I was naive, but I thought they'd want what I brought to the table. And they did not. But they said, stay as long as you like. And I used that to my advantage because that was when I pulled the plug on my marriage. That was when my father started at 89, had a 5-year deterioration. He died at 94 in dementia of an Alzheimer's variety. When you're 89, it's now they call it, I guess, late stage, but then they were having trouble maybe discerning it between regular dementia. I don't know. But this is something that I spent a lot of time discussing with clients, elder care plans, et cetera. I was flexible enough, courtesy of getting lost inside this behemoth company, that I ran down to Florida to check on them every third week and give my mother a break and take dad out to lunch. And as a result, 5 years on, I did not have any regrets when he passed. And that was the goal. I spent a lot of time in my practice. I spend a lot of time with Madina Molly talking about elder care planning. And people automatically associate it with financial tools and long-term care insurance. And I'm like, no, not that, not that. Let's talk about not having regrets. Let's talk about what's called an ethical will, where you tell your children the intangible stuff. You explain to them which values you want them to carry on. You explain to them, I don't know, why you left the business to child X and the money to child Y and the life insurance to child Z. Whatever it is that matters to you, do it before they're gone. Do it while you have a chance. And you can tell that a lot of my own life has informed my practice. And that's exactly the answer to your question, is that my financial planner said, life is coming at you fast. You'd make a great, I know you're unhappy where you are, you'd make a great retirement income planner.
Wow,
And
your financial planner told
my
you that?
financial planner is like,
Amazing.
you could do this. He had me, nerd that I am, he had me with credentialing. He's like, yeah, you can go back to school. And I'm thinking, okay,
Oh, yeah.
who signed up for that? But I did in my early 50s. I signed up for that. And now part of the certified financial planner domain, the CFP domain, is you have many, many continuing education credits that you are obligated to fulfill. And that actually does it for me.
Yeah. I'm a sucker for school too. It's
Yeah.
like really,
I
it's a
school
fun
well.
place.
I school well. But that Forget You Fund was used to launch my practice. I'll be very specific. I gave myself $125,000 to use to employ somebody because I was told that you will need help before you think you need help. And I went through probably 3 people because at the time and in the particular location, I wasn't finding anyone who wanted to be a successor. I think they saw how hard I was working and they're like, I don't want to work that hard. But that's what you want. You want to immediately hire your mini-me, the person who's going to inherit your practice or buy your practice, et cetera. I ended up creating, as I indicated, a continuity plan and a succession plan and executed on it at the end of last year. Because at the beginning of 23, just as FINRA SEC declares, all right, financial advisors, you've had your COVID holiday, back in the office 51% of the time. They're still not auditing it, but this was a thing. That was when my stepdaughter announced she was pregnant with her second child. And I turned to my husband. I said, oh my gosh, we have to help, which meant having 2 homes, one in the suburbs of Cincinnati and one in Saratoga Springs, New York. So we bounced back and forth. I described myself as a woman with her mother's spare walker in the boot and her grandchild's spare child seat in the back of the same SUV.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Talk about life changes. You've had such an illustrious career on the forefront of things and are so driven by your experience. But going into being a startup and launching something is definitely next level frontier, Sherry. And It's also so remarkable and incredible because you're not walking into it. Any entrepreneurs do today. I just graduated college and I'm gonna just launch my business. You're walking into this with maybe having a lot more information and knowledge that would make it even more terrifying than those who know much less. But as you're sort of now building this new business and really at the forefront of education and empowering around financial education. And ultimately, I think that is important with the confidence gap with women to help us feel like actually we know a lot more than we think we do. And we also have the ability to learn a lot and it can all be accessible. How has it been for you to roll up your sleeves and get back into those startup days of your early career, but now at the helm of your company? What has it been like? How are you thinking about allocating your money to this company, right? I mean, now it's like this is the big thing. And I think there's a blessing again with having the foresight to know, okay, this is how I allocate, this is what money means to me. But nonetheless, when you're the head of a company, it's like it is everything changes from what you think. So what has it been like?
It has been, well, it has been some trial and error. I have been very clear with what money I am willing to spend on my startup. And it's because it's not a product company per se. I am the brand to right now, myself, my creative partner and contractors. We are taking it step by step and full stop there. But there is a pool that is allocated and a fractional CFO who gives me monthly reports. And my message to everyone who does their own thing, and I think everyone should have a moonlighting experience, that you are a business. I treat myself like a business. I will not take money from a different cookie jar because I don't happen to have it. It's going to succeed or fail on its own merits. I think what's lovely about where I am, full disclosure, is that I could always retire in air quotes. I mean, when I say retire, I am lucky in that I don't have the obligation to earn money. I have achieved financial freedom in that I could support myself to 100 in the lifestyle to which I am accustomed. And this is what I teach my women of a certain agency. It is about knowing the numbers so that you sleep at night. And there's a big difference between rich and wealthy and not well funded, or maybe in the other direction. I think that one of the biggest things that I can solve, and I just do this via writing and sharing domain stories, is that women come to me having done everything right, but there isn't anybody to reaffirm that. So I've got women in tears. The first meeting always involves tissues. Women in tears that they don't know if they've saved enough. They don't know if they can ever stop working. They don't know if they can retire, and they're scared to spend. And my thought is, you are so accomplished. You've done such a good job saving. Why do you keep making yourself wrong? Let's just get a model. And if I show you on the model that you have enough, will that help? And they're like, oh my God, yes, that would. Oh, that would help so much. And I'm thinking, how do women not know this? And the answer is they have either via social convention or not having the opportunity, they have abdicated the financial planning to their significant other because they don't want to fight about it. And so they choose to abdicate that, or it is not somebody, they've never met anybody who used a financial model or a financial planner. They have only known who used investment advisors, different animal entirely. So there are a lot of reasons they may not have been exposed, but part of the mission of Madina Molly is that we know that there are only about 25,000 woman CFPs. That is not enough to service any population of women in the workplace. And that's why Madrina Molly exists, so that I can find a larger audience. I happen to believe, because you've been listening to me for an hour, that if you're going to do something, you might as well be financially successful doing it so that you can do more good. And that's why 5% of all revenue goes to build the endowment. And the endowment will, when it distributes, hopefully on an annual basis, again, we're just baby steps, but the endowment is intended to support organizations that are doing good work around what the cohort cares about. What does the cohort care about? Caregiving up and down the ladder. This is the first time 4 and 5 generations are coexisting at the same time. We have my nieces and nephews, they know their grandparents into adulthood. My grandchildren know their great grandparents. And I don't think that the press acknowledges that enough, that we no longer think of our grandparents as oldies. We think of them as cool because we've grown up with them doing cool stuff. And I guess we feel strongly about that, that you can do well by doing good, as Ben Franklin said. And so we said, let's build the philanthropy in right out of the box.
I love that. That's so beautiful. That's a really powerful mission, and it's easy to see why women are flocking to you because of your strength of character, but your mission and vision for the world, and how you see things manifesting. As you look at your own financial life, and obviously things have changed, life has changed, and you have a fabulous family and you're building a business, and it's so robust and exciting. As you look at how your financial pie has been allocated, what kind of risk profile, I guess, would you give yourself? It sounds like you're spearheading entrepreneurial activities, which to me is pretty high on the risk. Yet, based on our conversation, it sounds like you've been really risk averse in a lot of ways in which you've invested to build things over time. Tell me, how do you grade yourself on the riskiness profile, and how are you sort of looking at where the pie is allocated, and has that changed over time?
Sure, it has changed over time because the more wherewithal you have, the more risk you can take, right? And that, I guess that just goes without saying. So, financial planning, again, different than investment advisory, is primarily a defensive exercise. It is so, right? Offense sells tickets, defense wins championships. So, I believe in the hedge. I believe in having the asset that cannot go down. And I believe in using tools that will cover my tushy. And those are insurance tools. Okay, I probably should put in the caveat, none of this constitutes financial advice. It is financial education. It is my own finances. And by the way, in both Madina Molly, and I'm going to start putting it on LinkedIn this year, I'm doing loud financial planning this week in my money. And I'm actually going to talk, maybe not with the exact number of zeros, but I'm actually going to talk and write about what I'm doing with my money and how I'm thinking about it. Because I find that that's what elicits questions that people say, I never knew this, or, oh, that's what I should do with under 2-year money. Okay, it's quite extraordinary. Anyhow, the grading is as follows. My investments are aggressive, and they are created in, I'm going to call them staging buckets. For example, anything that is Roth, which is the last thing I will use, is 98% equities, 2% cash. All of the other portfolios are 75-25. And the reason they are able to remain that way is that I am using both insurance and income annuities to supplement my future Social Security. And neither my husband nor I have taken our Social Security. We haven't reached our full retirement age, but we're planning to wait until 70. And our goal is to, I guess I'm giving away my blog for tomorrow. Our goal is to line up 2 Social Securities, his pension, he's former military, so he has a federal pension from the military, my income annuity and what is called a QLAC, which is a later income annuity that you can do with a traditional IRA. Again, ask your financial planner. These streams, which you cannot outlive, are all set up so they will pay out until the second of us dies. And that will enable us to basically wait out a bad market.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm like, I love you sharing because you are right. Now I have so many more questions, but unfortunately, we don't have so much more time. And I'm like, Sherry, oh my gosh, I have so many things I need to. Happy to have you in my court. I'm like, there's a lot more
Well,
fascinating stuff.
We need to
there.
just have you can ask your questions in Madina Molly community. You can just log in and ask. How's that?
That sounds amazing. As you are looking, Sherry, to the future, we've alluded to this many times now, but we are living longer than ever, and which means that you've got a lot more living to do, and it puts me at pretty much a maybe, right? So it's like we've got so much more ahead of us. If you were to look back, let's say at this ripe young age of 105, and really think about legacy and the body of work that you are creating, what might that look like?
I think that I'm doing it. I think I'm creating the legacy because I don't want women, especially corporate women. I think the entrepreneurs are getting with it right now, but especially corporate women, I do not want them to have experienced what I experienced. Everything from the Me Too of it, to the missed opportunities of it, to the inappropriate exclusion. And I think that now that my youthful high dudgeon is done, I no longer carry the anger or the unfairness of it. And I'm being very candid here. I would want women to know enough to build parallel infrastructures. I don't believe the existing power structure is ever going to, I mean, there's certainly no moral high ground. One can hope that they will recognize the economic opportunity of ceding a little bit of space, which is a nice way of saying we have run out of white men. If you want to grow the economy, you're just going to have to include others. And since allies have not been allies, or professed allies have not been allies in that regard, I want women to know what I know about money so that they can build parallel infrastructure. And I know you work with a lot of people who are in the private equity and investment space, and I have those too, right? That's called diversification. But I think that personal financial wherewithal is that silent gap. And I want women to be able to sleep at night.
Mm. Amen. That is beautiful, Sherry. Mic drop. I love this idea of building parallel infrastructure. It's actually for another time and maybe over a coffee, but I think that what we'll find is there are many more women feeling and thinking along those lines as far as what the future of those infrastructures can look like. My last two favorite questions take a little bit of a detour because obviously we've spoken so much about your illustrious career and just all the stuff you're building now with being an entrepreneur and really the future of Madina Molly. But I want to know, outside of putting money into your startup, what are some of your most favorite ways in which you spend money now? What brings you joy?
So I'll give you the big picture and then the guilty pleasures. The big picture is experiences. It took a long time to pull away from work enough to do 2 weeks here and 2 weeks there. I didn't have a 2-week vacation until I want to say 6 or 7 years ago, which is crazy. Crazy. Other than the sabbatical, and the sabbatical was nice, the point is the notion of a vacation, I could never take that much time from work. So travel, certainly, and travel in style. The hubs and I have, and I guess when you're repartnered, you want to go back to some places and see them with your partner. because sharing is everything. So we are covering some ground that we've already covered. I think the favorite trip to date was Morocco in 2023. Cannot say enough amazing things about culture, food, shopping, although he almost traded me for 3,000 camels. I think the rug seller was making some kind of deal. I have no idea what was going on, but they know the tourism. You are in a Mediterranean country. You just happen to be on the other side of the Mediterranean, and a stone's throw from Spain. That was the biggie. That was the biggie. The guilty pleasures. So the guilty pleasures would be glasses. Can't resist a great pair of glass frames. And I am very much looking forward to, and this, of course, shows the age. Everybody wants the smart glasses with the built-in vision and the built-in GPS, et cetera. I want the ones with the built-in hearing aids.
Yes.
I want the directional hearing aids for crowds. So I will absolutely blow some money on that kind of wearable tech. And having just turned peak 65, I will say that the hubs purchased Tahitian pearls for me. And I'm a pearl person. So back to the original conversation about the strand of pearls. Now they're just a little different. They're unique, and they're black pearls from Tahiti.
Gorgeous. Oh, how beautiful. Oh my gosh. I can't wait
So
to
I
see them.
probably shouldn't say that, but it's a guilty pleasure, and I'm going to wear them with love and pride. And yeah, I think, let me add one more thing, because this is the truth. I love to give to the kids and the grandkids because we can, because I remember when things were tight. And my parents weren't in a position to help in the form of gifts. I mean, if I had needed help, they would have bailed me out, I'm certain. But it was never, money was never so loose that they could just throw it in my direction. The fact that we can makes us very happy. And that's in the form of experiences too, whether it's baseball tickets or tennis tickets to the Cincinnati Open, et cetera.
I love that. How fabulous. Sherry, it's been incredible to hear your journey and your vision. You are a shining star, and I'm grateful to know you. Before we jump off here, what is it that the audience can do for you right now? What are you calling in? What do you need? What are you wanting? How can we best support you in creating this big, beautiful vision that you have of the world?
Join me on LinkedIn. So certainly follow me as Sherry Finkel Murphy and Madina Molly, because I am building awareness of the brand. There is a community. The more people who join the community, the happier I am, because that is a place to ask financial planning and longevity planning questions without anybody trying to sell a financial product. And that's the whole point, is that women want education. They don't want to be sold financial product.
That is incredible. What a gift to have you today, Sherry. Thank you so very much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I am grateful.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Getting Rich Together. Please take a minute to subscribe. And if you like this episode, I'd love it if you could share it with a friend who is ready to elevate their financial future. Until next time, let's keep getting rich together.